After losing his sight in an accident, a young boy gains abilities linked to his super hearing and decides to use his new powers to fight crime in a silent way. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Daredevil, from 2003. As a child, Matt Murdock lived in New York's Hell's Kitchen and was constantly attacked by the other kids in his neighborhood. His father was a great boxer in his youth, but when Matt was born he abandoned his career and became an alcoholic. Despite his drinking problems, Jack worked hard to give his son the best education, because he wanted a different future for him. One day, however, Matt discovers that his father is working as a henchman for a group of mobsters and is extremely disappointed. Seeing the man he most admires threatening one of his neighbors, the boy runs away and almost gets run over by a forklift. Luckily, the driver manages to swerve, but ends up puncturing some barrels of chemical and Matt is hit by the corrosive liquid. On that day, the boy lost his sight, but his cells were modified in such a way that all his other senses became extremely acute, allowing him, even without sight, to understand his surroundings. When he wakes up from his coma, Matt is frightened because he still doesn't know how to deal with his new abilities. Minutes later, Jack appears in the room to break the sad news to his son and, to his surprise, the boy reveals that he already knew he was blind. Instead of being consoled by his father, it is Matt who consoles him, because Jack feels guilty about the accident that changed his son's life forever. Over the next few months, the boy faced a long journey until he learned to cope with his blindness, and his persistence motivated his father to return to his boxing career. For several months, Jack trained tirelessly until he felt able to return to the ring and face his first opponent after so many years. Inspired by him, Matt decided to start practicing his punches and soon realized that both his physical abilities and his senses were evolving much faster than usual. His keen sense of touch gave him strength and balance over humans, so that the whole city became his playground. Thanks to these new skills, Matt gained a great deal of self-confidence and became a boy without fear. Not even those bullies in his neighborhood were able to intimidate him, because now he knew how to fight back. With the help of his cane, Matt manages to take down all those delinquents single-handedly and returns home proud of himself. That night, before entering the ring, Jack receives a visit from Fallon, the boss of the gang he used to work for, and refuses his invitation to return to work for him. However, the gangster reveals that all the opponents the boxer has faced so far were working for him, and that's why Jack was able to win. Upon hearing this, the man feels like a failure, so he enters the ring determined to follow Fallon's orders and intentionally plans to lose the fight. As he falls to the ground, Jack hears the cries of his son cheering him on and gathers his strength to get up. He manages to knock out his opponent, and Fallon is furious when he realizes that the boxer didn't follow his orders. However, this act of rebellion did not go unpunished, and, at the end of that night, Jack was caught in an ambush. After being beaten up, Jack received the final blow, and, by the time Matt managed to find him, his father was already lifeless. At that moment, Matt promised himself that he would dedicate his life to helping those in need and seek justice against those who dared to hurt innocent people. A few decades later, the young man becomes an excellent lawyer. Thanks to his skills, he can always spot when someone is lying and does his best to defend his clients. Sometimes, however, the criminals manage to convince the jury that they are innocent, and, when this happens, Matt doesn't think twice before putting on his Daredevil costume and taking the law into his own hands. After being cleared of a very serious crime he committed against a woman months ago, Jose Quesada decides to go to a bar to celebrate and, in the middle of the night, is surprised by the arrival of the vigilante. Upon seeing him, the criminal's cronies pull out their guns and start shooting, but the bullets can't stop Daredevil, who viciously beats up all the guys in front of him. With the help of his sharp hearing, Matt is able to detect the bullets being fired in his direction and dodges them all. After finally defeating all the gang members, Daredevil goes after his real target and Quesada tries to escape. The man quickly runs to the subway station and hides with a revolver in his hand, preparing to eliminate his opponent. However, Daredevil manages to approach cautiously from the rear and catches him. Just as he was about to take justice against the criminal, a train approaches and the vigilante starts screaming in pain, as his ears are very sensitive and are bothered by the noise. Seeing the man who tried to eliminate him kneeling in front of him, Quesada doesn't think twice before pulling out his gun and preparing to shoot. But before he can pull the trigger, Daredevil strikes him and manages to knock him onto the tracks. Soon afterwards, a train approaches and, hours later, the police find the criminal's body broken in half. After being informed of the attack, Ben Urich appears at the scene of the accident in an attempt to collect evidence to prove the existence of Daredevil. However, Detective Nick tries to convince him to stop publishing his reports, as he is afraid that new criminals will start to be inspired by these stories. When he gets home, Matt takes off his suit and goes to take a shower after putting away all his battle gear. When he gets out of the shower, the lawyer plunges his body into the bathtub to relax and, just then, he hears the sound of a woman being shot. To avoid hearing the suffering of everyone within a radius of several kilometers, Matt locks himself inside the bathtub and spends the night with his ears submerged. The next morning, when he meets his partner, he finds out that the local newspaper has published an article saying that Quesada was eliminated by Daredevil. Despite Matt's insistent claims that this vigilante doesn't exist, Foggy is completely convinced that Daredevil is real and says that one day he will see him in person. During the meal, the man tries to convince his partner that they need to get new clients, because they only defend humble people who have been victims of some injustice and these people don't have much money to pay them. However, Matt refuses to work for criminals and tries to convince his friend that this is a bad idea when he suddenly hears the sound of a woman approaching. When Elektra enters the diner, Matt is completely enchanted by her scent and decides to go and talk to her. They talk briefly, but the woman refuses to give her name. After getting her coffee, Elektra leaves and Matt begins to feel even more intrigued. So he decides to go after her and, when she realizes she's being followed, the woman attacks him. However, to her surprise, even though he can't see, Matt manages to dodge all the blows and they start fighting in a playground full of children. When they witness the fight, a group of young people approach to watch the scene up close, until Matt finally managed to immobilize his opponent. Not satisfied with her defeat, Elektra steps on his foot and pushes him into a bench. After establishing her victory, she finally reveals her name and says goodbye as her bodyguard arrives. At that moment, Matt discovers that the young woman is the daughter of Nicolas Nachios, a very famous billionaire in New York. Before leaving, Elektra says that she will meet Matt soon and leaves the man increasingly fascinated by her. That afternoon, Nicolas pays a visit to the Kingpin and informs him that he wants to break up the partnership. The man is tired of receiving threats and putting his family's lives at risk, so he asks Wilson Fisk to buy his share of the business they built together. When he arrives at his office, Matt discovers that he has a new client. A Queens resident is being framed for taking the life of a woman named Lisa. However, within the first few minutes of talking to the accused, Matt realizes that he is innocent and agrees to defend him in the case. In an attempt to collect evidence that will lead to the real culprit behind Lisa's perishment, Matt decides to break into the perished woman's apartment. When he runs his hands over the carpet and smells the blood in the house, the lawyer comes to the conclusion that Lisa was shot inside the apartment and dragged out to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Probing the table, Matt notices some letters and numbers carved into the wood and asks Foggy to write them down in his notepad. Weeks later, when Jackson is summoned to appear in court, Matt presents all the evidence he has been able to gather to exonerate him. After the hearing, he is surprised by Elektra's arrival and invites her to the terrace of the old building where Matt lived as a child. That was his favorite view of the city when he was little and he wanted to share it with Elektra. At that moment, Matt says that it will rain in a few minutes and, according to him, each raindrop makes a sound when it hits the surface. When this happens, it's as if he can see again and so he has the opportunity to see the beautiful woman in front of him. Impressed by Elektra's beauty, Matt decides to kiss her, but is interrupted by the sound of a fight taking place a few blocks away. At this point, despite his annoyance, the vigilante says goodbye to Elektra and goes to do his duty. After finding the assailant, Daredevil begins to pursue him and, after striking him, orders him to stay away from Hell's Kitchen, only to discover that the neighborhood is now under the command of the Kingpin. At that moment, Daredevil realizes that the guy's son is present and the boy starts crying out of fear of him. Ashamed, Matt tells himself he's not a bad guy and decides to go to church the next morning. When he gets there, the vigilante meets Father Lantom, who tells him that he is very welcome to visit the temple whenever he wants. Later, when he arrives at the office, Matt learns that he has been invited to attend the gala ball at the Grand Hotel and that he can bring a date. When he hears this, Foggy immediately offers to accompany his friend, but Matt says he won't go, as he knows the invitation was sent by Elektra. After what happened the night before, he decides to end his involvement with that woman, because he knows that at some point he will hurt her. However, Foggy manages to convince him not to give up on romance before he even starts a relationship and the two agree to meet up to go to the ball together. Upon arriving at the hotel, Matt is approached by Ben Urich and the journalist hands over his card so that the lawyer can call him when he is available, as he has an important matter to discuss with him. When he sees Wilson Fisk walking down the hall, Foggy doesn't think twice before trying to approach him to introduce himself as the representative of an excellent law firm. His goal that night is to meet important people to increase his client portfolio, but Matt says he won't be able to represent him because he and his partner only defend clients who are innocent. After saying these words, Matt walks through the hall looking for Elektra and manages to find her by her delicate scent of roses. At that moment, he takes the opportunity to apologize for having left a few days ago and asks her to dance. That night, a mercenary named Bullseye arrives in New York and eliminates an innocent man to steal his motorcycle. As he watches his daughter dancing smilingly in the company of the lawyer, Nicholas receives an unwelcome visit from Wilson, who says goodbye to his ex-partner after putting a rose in his pocket. At this point, the man realizes that he has just been threatened and asks his bodyguards to take him away. Seeing her father leaving the party, Elektra soon realizes that something is wrong and goes to talk to him, but Nicholas orders his men to take her home as well. Without understanding what is happening, the young woman says goodbye to Matt and gets into the limousine to leave. Concerned for Elektra's safety, Matt doesn't think twice before putting on his costume and following her. As he watches the limo make its way through the city, he notices that the vehicle is being followed by a motorcyclist and soon realizes that Nicholas and his daughter are in danger. After throwing metal objects to hit the driver and security guard in the throat, Bullseye breaks his motorcycle and the limousine ends up crashing into a postal van. At that moment, Bullseye prepares to attack, but is surprised by the arrival of Daredevil. Immediately, the mercenary throws a blade in his direction, but the vigilante manages to dodge the attack and Bullseye is impressed, as he never misses his target. Determined to eliminate anyone who stands between him and his goal, the biker decides to run Matt down, but ends up being knocked off his bike with a kick to the head. The truth is that Bullseye has been hired by the Kingpin to eliminate Nicholas and, after stealing Daredevil's baton, he throws it in the billionaire's direction. This time, Bullseye manages to hit his target squarely and Elektra starts shooting at the vigilante because she believes he was the one who attacked her father. When the ammunition runs out, the woman begins to cry over the perishment of the person she loves most, because she knows it's too late to take Nicholas to hospital. After the perishment of Elektra's father, Matt returns home furious because he feels he has failed in his mission to protect the girl he is in love with. The next day, after eliminating one of the Kingpin's security guards, Bullseye waits for him in his office and is congratulated on his excellent work. As well as eliminating Nicholas, the mercenary was able to frame the Daredevil, but Bullseye is not at all satisfied, as for the first time he has missed a throw. So, to restore his wounded pride, Bullseye says he will eliminate the vigilante. That day, after her father's wake, which Wilson Fisk ironically attended, Elektra walks to her car and runs into Matt. Just then, it starts to rain and for a brief moment, the lawyer is able to see her once more. Before leaving, Elektra says she wants revenge for her father's perishment and Matt tries to convince her that this won't solve things, but the woman ignores him and leaves. Ben then approaches him and says that he has relevant information to exonerate Jackson. He then reveals that Lisa was his informant and was getting involved with one of the Kingpin's henchmen. In one of their conversations, the woman mentioned the name of Officer Mackenzie, who later testified against Jackson in court. That night, after obtaining this information, Matt breaks into the officer's convertible and handcuffs him in the backseat. While questioning the witness, Matt causes numerous accidents to force Mackenzie to tell the truth and discovers that he has been hired by the Kingpin to lie in court. In his defense, the old man says that anyone who doesn't obey the Kingpin's orders ends up like Nicholas Nachios and says that Elektra will be next, because no member of the victims' families is spared. Meanwhile, Foggy remains at the office trying to unravel the identity of the criminal who eliminated Lisa and, with the help of Karen, his secretary, he realizes that the clue Matt found was actually upside down. In this way, the lawyer manages to find the initials of Wesley, one of the employees who works for Wilson Fisk. At that moment, Ben goes to the morgue to find his friend, the coroner, who shows him the stick that was used to hit Nicholas' chest. The most curious thing is that when turning the base of the stick, a metal rod appears and it turns into a walking stick. Suddenly, Ben gets a call from Foggy and his partner says he needs to talk to him about a discovery he made about Lisa's perishment. That night, while Matt prepares to go after Bullseye, Elektra trains her fighting skills on sandbags to get her revenge. During the search for the mercenary, Daredevil is taken by surprise by Elektra, who attacks him ferociously with her daggers. While trying to dodge those blows, the vigilante claims that he wasn't the one who eliminated Nicholas Nachios, but the woman doesn't believe him. During the battle, Elektra is immobilized by Matt and he does everything he can not to hurt her. His aim in refusing to react during the battle is to prove to his girlfriend that he is not the enemy. But instead of stopping to listen, Elektra takes the opportunity to complete her revenge plan and strikes Daredevil in the chest with her dagger. Before finishing it, the woman says that she needs to look into the eyes of the man who took her father's life, so she removes the mask. When she realizes that all this time she was fighting her boyfriend, Elektra regrets it deeply and realizes that it really wasn't him who attacked her father. At that moment, Bullseye appears and Matt orders the young woman to hide, as he has gone there to eliminate her. But instead of leaving, Elektra goes to meet the mercenary for revenge and throws the dagger in his direction. However, the man manages to catch the blade and throws it back in the woman's direction, who ends up hitting her hand when she tries to hold it. After removing the blade, Elektra ignores her pain and goes to meet Bullseye. However, the man is a trained criminal with vast experience in battle, so he manages to knock her down and hits her neck with a playing card. Seeing his girlfriend in trouble, Matt promptly tries to help her, but he's seriously injured and can't get up. To finish his mission, the mercenary grabs the ninja's neck and strikes her abdomen with the dagger to ensure that she has no chance of survival. Suddenly, a police helicopter appears and orders Bullseye to kneel with his hands on his head, but he throws a rose at his victim and decides to run away. Due to her serious injury, Elektra is unable to get up to call for help and drags herself to Matt to spend her last minutes of life by his side. Gradually, the vigilante hears the woman's heart stopping and realizes that she is gone. When he hears the police approaching, Daredevil flees and Elektra's body is found by Detective Nick. In an attempt to hide from the police, Matt goes to church and is helped by Father Lantom, who uses a piece of cloth to staunch his wound. Minutes later, Bullseye appears in the church and throws a blade next to the priest to announce his arrival. Immediately, Daredevil orders Lantom to flee out the back door and call the police while he confronts his enemy. After being hit by a tray, Matt throws his baton at the mercenary and manages to hit him. He then runs towards him and Bullseye tries to escape, but is followed by the vigilante. While they are both hanging from one of the pipes of the cathedral's organ, a colony of bats comes out of the instrument and Daredevil ends up falling. However, before he hits the ground, he uses a rope to swing himself up and continues the duel against Bullseye. During the battle, the mercenary realizes he's losing and tries to escape, but Matt is still on his tail. In an attempt to throw him off, Bullseye throws all his blades, but Daredevil manages to catch them in midair and sends them back to their target. After being hit in the forehead, the criminal breaks the church's stained glass window and collects the shards of glass to attack Matt, who surprisingly manages to dodge them all. So Bullseye decides to make his last bet and starts ringing the bell in an attempt to repel his enemy with that noise. Luckily, his plan works and Daredevil remains completely still, trying to cover his ears while the police try to storm the church. Now that he knows his enemy's greatest weakness, the mercenary begins to attack him intensely and uses the musical instruments to produce an even louder sound. Bewildered, Matt is unable to defend himself, but discovers that Wilson Fisk is the kingpin. When eliminating his victims, the man always orders his henchmen to throw a red rose over the body as a form of signature, and when he discovers this, Matt realizes that it was he who ordered his father to be eliminated years ago. Just as he is about to have his heart hit by a wooden stake, Daredevil manages to stop the attack and, when he hears the shot fired by one of the policemen, he puts Bullseye's hands in front of the bullet. After having his palms wounded by the projectile, the mercenary decides to surrender, but Matt throws him through the window and he lands on the windshield of Ben's car. After eliminating him, Daredevil goes after the Kingpin to complete his revenge, but when he arrives at Wilson's building, the vigilante is surprised to realize that the criminal was already waiting for him. However, the duel won't be as easy as he imagined, because right at the start of the battle, Wilson demonstrates that he doesn't need his security guards to protect him. When Matt is thrown through the window, he is stunned by the sound of the glass shattering, so the Kingpin takes advantage of this moment of vulnerability to throw him through the wall and onto the ceiling. Before eliminating him once and for all, Wilson takes a rose from his desk and rips off Daredevil's mask. At that moment, he discovers his true identity and is amazed to realize that a blind lawyer was able to become New York's greatest vigilante. When he is about to be defeated, Matt activates the sprinklers used to put out fires and manages to see his opponent. After landing countless punches on the Kingpin, Daredevil strikes his knees and prepares to make his last attack when he hears the sound of approaching cars. From that distance, Matt is able to hear the police radio and discovers that Ben has revealed the true identity of the Kingpin to Detective Nick. Now Wilson will be arrested and spend the rest of his life in jail. With a clear conscience, Matt returns home and, the next day, Jackson is acquitted because Foggy has managed to prove to the jury that Wesley was the one who eliminated Lisa at the Kingpin's command. That afternoon, Matt goes to the church to visit Father Lantom and meets Ben. The journalist has gone after him to tell him that he is writing a story entitled Justice is Blind, in which he intends to reveal the true identity of Daredevil to the whole country. However, when he finally finished writing the article, Ben decided to delete it because he knows that New York will become a much more dangerous city without Daredevil. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.